With Jira Product Discovery, Atlassian introduced a new type of date field. This date field lets you select from a single date, a month, and an entire calendar quarter. However, using this date field with Jira Automation can be a little bit more tricky because of how the dates are saved within the system. Let's take a look at an example as to why you might want to use automation with Jira Product Discovery dates and deep dive into how you read and write values to these new types of date fields. Let's take a look. In this example, we're looking at a Jira Product Discovery space aimed at planning future projects. We've got a list of projects here, as well as 2 Jira Product Discovery date fields, and then a couple extra fields. First, let's take a look at these new date fields themselves. When you click into one, you see a new picker at the top, letting you select from day, month, or quarter. The day view works as you would expect, where you can select an individual date. When you switch to the month view, you can select a calendar month, as well as switch between the calendars and the years. For the quarter view, this lets you select a 3-month period on any calendar year. In this example, I would like to automatically calculate the project's end date based off of the date that the project aims to start, the total amount of effort days that the project is expected to require, and the percentage of time that developers are able to allocate towards this project. So let's change our project start date here to March 1st. I have a Jira Automation rule in the background that's going to do this calculation for us. So in a second here, we'll see the project end date populate. There we go. June 19th is when it's calculated this. Okay, great. Now let's take a look at how these date fields store information. To do that, let's create a new automation rule. So I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to call this rule JPD date field. Nice and simple. Now, editing my trigger, I'm going to trigger this based off of when a field changes, and in this case, I'm going to trigger this based off of the project start date. So this field is the one that I want to select. So anytime that this field changes, our automation rule is going to trigger. Next, nice and simple, I'm just going to log something to our audit log. So I'll select log action. And here, what I want to do is I want to log the value of the project start date field. So I can use this smart value picker, and I can type in project start to pull up my list of custom fields. This is the one that I want. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it in here and then close my picker. Right at the start, I'm actually just going to type in project start date, just so I know what I'm looking at when I'm viewing the audit log. Okay, great. I'm going to turn this rule on, return to my previous ones, and turn off our old one, just to make sure we're not getting confused. Now, when I come and change this date, let's go back to February 1st. I can go to the audit log of this new rule that we've created, and we can see the entry here at the top. If I expand this, this is going to show us how data is stored within this new Jira Product Discovery date field. What we can see right off the top is that this does not look like a regular date field inside of Jira or Jira Service Management. Because this date field lets us select an entire month or a calendar quarter, this field needs to store more than just a single date. It's storing a start date and an end date for that period. So in this case, our selection was for a single date. So the start value is set to 2026-0201 for February 1st. The end value is set to the exact same thing. Okay, what happens if we select an entire month? So let's go to the month option and let's pick June. Now, when we go back to our audit log, if we refresh for the most recent execution, what we can see is now the start date is June 1st of 2026, while the end date is June 30th. So when you select an entire month, it selects the first and the last date of that month when it populates the value. All right, let's take a look at when we pick an entire calendar quarter. So if we select July through September of 2026, and we come back to our rule, and again refresh our audit log for that most recent execution, what we can see, we're following the same pattern. The start date is the first date of that quarter, July 1st, and the end date is the last day of that quarter, September 30th. This is the format that dates are stored inside of Jira Product Discovery date fields. Now, this doesn't help us all that much because we need a single date in order to manipulate that. But we're able to use some clever functionality that Jira Automation and Smart Values allow us. So this date format is actually in the format of a JSON object. The squiggle braces at the start and end of the value indicate that it's an object. And what we can see in here is a start and the value. So this is a key value pair with the comma indicating that there are two keys, start and end, and two values. So what we can do is we can take this string and we can use the JSON string to object function that Atlassian provides in order to convert it to a JSON object inside of the automation rule. Doing this is going to let us use dot notation to select one of the two key value pairs and then return the value from that pair. So let's take a look at how that might work. I like using variables for this. It keeps things clean. It allows us to reference them later. They're wonderful. So I'm going to call this project start date, and we're going to bring in this JSON string to object function. We can see here in the example that we need to use two squiggle braces. So let's do that. JSON string to object. We're going to put two parentheses and then two squiggle braces. Inside of the parentheses, we're going to include our custom field. That's where we're getting the JSON string. So in this case, we're going to go custom field underscore 10,540. So now this is going to convert it to a JSON object. And then we're going to utilize that dot notation to select the start value from that field. So if I come here and outside of the parentheses, I'll type period start. What this is going to do is it's going to pull the start value out of that JSON object and return it into the project start date variable that we've created. Now, to take a look at this in the audit log, we're going to log an action. I'm going to do start date, and we will pull that out from the project start date variable that we've created. I'm going to click update, and let's go back to our work item here, and we're going to change this, and let's go back to a date, and maybe let's pick May the 1st. Back in our rule, let's go to the audit log and make sure that this is working as expected. So we can see our configuration change here and a successful run. So if we expand the successful run, what we can see, we've set our start date to May the 1st, and we've logged the start date itself being May 1st. However, now we can see we've just got the date itself and we don't have all of the rest of the extra JSON object. Fantastic. So that's how you can pull the date value out of one of these custom fields. And then you can use some of Atlassian's date functionality, date smart values to manipulate this as you choose. Okay, so now that we know how to read the values and potentially manipulate them using Jira Automation, how do we save new values into other Jira date fields in Jira Product Discovery? Well, that's a little bit tricky. So let's take a look. We're going to go back to our rule and we're going to add a component. Now, normally when we edit fields and save new values, we're going to do adding an action, and then we can use the edit work item action for Jira. Well, let's say we're going to change the project start date, and to be simple, let's just update the project end date to be the exact same thing. So what you would normally do is you'd come in here and type in your field that you're looking for, but even already we can see typing in the word project for project end, we don't see our custom field. Atlassian has not yet made these Jira Product Discovery fields available in the Jira work item in this edit view. So what we need to do instead is use this more options and use the advanced configuration in order to set the values ourselves. We've got two options when we look at this. The first one is sending a notification. In this case, I'm going to turn this off just so that I'm not sending notifications for something I don't need. And then secondly, we have this additional fields section where we can populate the different details that we're providing the Jira Automation rule to update. Atlassian provides some wonderful documentation here. So if we open this up, we can see all of the different formats and structures that they're going to need. I already have one pre-populated here, or at least the core structure populated, so that we can just get started. And this is what it looks like. We've got braces at the start. We're telling the automation rule that we're updating some fields. Inside of this second set of braces, we're telling it we're updating a custom field, and then this is the value that we're populating. So in order to correct this, we need to do a couple things. First, we need to find the correct custom field ID. And then second, we need to update the start date and end date variables that I've got preloaded here with the variables that we're using, which is project start date and potentially project end date if we want to do some date math. So first thing, let's get the custom field ID. In order to do that, we can go to any of these other custom fields in the actions and use our smart value picker. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in project end just for the purpose of identifying what our field ID is. So in this example, it's 10,611. I'm going to close this. I'm not going to make any changes here, but I'll bring that down here into our edit, and I'm going to change these placeholders with 10,611. That's our custom field for the project end date. Okay, great. To keep things simple, I'm just going to set the project end date to be the same thing as our project start date. So because this value is saving it as a string, which is exactly what we need to populate in here, I'm just going to update these two variables to say project start date. Project start date on the first one, and I'm just going to copy that and paste it into the second one. Fantastic. So now what we have is a value that looks very similar to the value of the field that we're reading. And this is exactly true. We need to set these date fields to follow this format. A JSON object with two values inside of it, a start date and an end date, where the dates themselves follow the ISO format of year-month-day. So looking at our rule details, that's exactly what we see here. Because we're setting this as a string, all of the quotes within it we need to escape, which is why you see a bunch of extra forward slashes, or backslashes rather. And we've got the start value, our project start date, we know from our audit log is already in the right format, and our project end date is also going to be in here with the right format. So I'm going to go and update this rule, and I'm going to change this project start date. Let's go to July 1st. So now if we give this a second for the automation rule to kick in the background, we should see this project end date update to July 1st, just like we saw. Fantastic. So that's how you update some of these custom fields using the advanced functionality in Jira Automation. Now let's take a look at our more advanced example where we're using some of these other fields to calculate and then update our project end date based off of that calculation. For that, I'm going to go back to our other rule. I'm just going to turn off that test one we're building and use this predefined one. And let's go through this step by step. So our first action here is we're triggering this based off of when our start date, our developer percentage, and our effort days have any change. Great. So anytime one of those three fields changes, we're going to be updating our end date value. Next, I'm creating a variable here for the project's start date. And this is exactly what we did on the test, where we're doing a JSON string to object, and we're taking that custom field and we're pulling out that start value. I like to log things to the audit log just to make sure I can keep track. So that's what I'm doing here. And next, I'm calculating the total number of effort days required. So my math here is I'm taking the number of effort days and multiplying it by the inverse of the percentage, so 100 divided by 75, and that's going to get me the total number of days, assuming that people are only able to work on this 75% of the time. I've got that happening here with smart value math. So what you can see, we've got our math identifier. We're taking one of those two custom fields, we're multiplying it by 100, dividing by the percentage, And that's the math that we're getting. That's going to return us the total number of effort days required for that individual project. And then of course, I'm logging that to the audit log to keep track. Next, we're creating a new end date. This new end date I've got configured here a little bit differently. So we're taking our project's start date. Remember, we pulled this from above, and I'm converting that string into a date object using .toDate. I'm also feeding it the format year, month, date in parentheses, just as a precaution and just to ensure that it's following the right format. I'm then using the plus business days function to add a number of business days on top of the project's start date based off of what I provide to it inside of its parentheses. In there, I'm feeding it the total number of effort days that we had just previously calculated. And again, I'm converting that to a number because this is going to be a string. Finally, I'm converting that whole thing into a Jira date, which is simply formatting it in the year-month-date format without any time zones connected to it. Again, I add it to the audit log just to keep track. And finally, I'm editing this work item and I'm putting the start date to be our new end date, and I'm setting the end date to also be our new end date. So if I come back and I turn this rule on and we edit this, let's go back and let's actually set this to May the 4th. What we'll see here is in a second, the automation rule is once again going to change this project end date based off of that calculation. And just to double check, we can come back to our rule and go to the audit log and keep track. So we can see here that it has in fact run, and it's set our date here to August 24th. So if we come back and check, yes, it is. It has been changed to August 24th. Hopefully we can see this happen in real time. So let's change this back to April 1st, and let's give it a moment here to automatically change. And there we go. It's automatically calculated to be July 22nd. So finally, just to take a look at this audit log, what we can see here, our initial project start date was April 1st. It's calculated the total number of effort days to be 80 days total, and our new end date is that July 22nd date that we saw. So there you have it. That's how you use Jira Automation and Jira Product Discovery date fields in tandem. Sound off in the comments if you have any fun ideas on how you can automate these fields. Have fun.